Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. When Pope Francis says Mass in Havana's Revolution Square this Sunday, there may be an economic revolution as well, as he hopes to draw closer ties between the United States and Cuba, an effort that could have a tremendous impact on New Orleans and its Cuban population. We'll hear from a journalist who has been in Cuba examining what to expect. Less holy, but also with a message, is the gubernatorial election. We'll look at the advertising wars and what business wants. We'll also get the latest on the World Trade Center development and more job cuts at the Times Picayune. At the altar for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Jason Berry, correspondent for GroundTruthProject.org. Tyler Bridges, freelance journalist. And Jaquetta White, reporter, The New Orleans Advocate. I'm going to go over to Tyler first. And the ads are now coming for in the governor's race. Everybody seems to be getting them out there. So what are we hearing? What messages from whom?
Right. On Tuesday, Lieutenant Governor Jay Darden became the latest and the final of the major gubernatorial candidates to actually begin airing his ads. So at this point, we have ads from Senator Vitter, Lieutenant Governor Darden, John Bell Edwards, the only Democrat, and also the Public Service Commissioner Scott Angel. We also have some very heavy advertising from outside groups. They're called super PACs. There's one very fierce ad against David Vitter, dealing with the prostitution scandal. And there is also, Vitter is attacking his rivals in the race as well. So people have been saying, Marcia, that the race was slow in getting going. Well, it's now going.
Well, we're in a real sprint right now. Just, 5 weeks left, really, until the primary. So we're seeing some attack ads. The other candidates have PACs as well as Vitter. Does
Scott Angel.
Okay, and we're seeing ads from them yet?
Yeah, Angel has an attack ad. The outside Angel PAC has an attack ad against Vitter on Common Core, because Vitter is now an opponent of Common Core. He was a supporter.
Vitter, how is he responding to these attacks that are coming his way right now?
Well, he wants to keep the race focused on what he calls the future. The one thing he really doesn't want to talk about is the prostitution scandal. I was at an event on Monday night at Loyola University. The Alliance for Good Government was asking candidates questions, and the last question was to the candidates who there. The only major gubernatorial candidates were Darden and Vitter, and the question was, have you ever violated Chapter 14 as an elected official? I'm not a lawyer, I didn't know what it was, but basically they're asking, did you violate the law when you were doing the prostitution from years ago? And he got very upset with that question.
Yes, sometimes you see this before, when a candidate has something dark in their past, you know it's going to come up at some point during the election. It's almost to their advantage to have people bring it up at the beginning of the election cycle, so that at the time, you don't want people talking about this in October. And so by then you could say, look, we talked about this months ago, this is over, it's old news now. It was like Hillary Clinton last year dealing with the whole Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky thing. You know, they came out, they talked about it. Now this year she can say, we've done that, let's move on.
Well, I think now she's got her emails to worry about.
I think what Vitter was hoping was what happened in 2010 when he ran for re-election. He was against Democratic Congressman Charlie Melanson, and Melanson didn't really get much of an opportunity to bring it up, and Vitter crushed him in the election. And so I think he was hoping that voters and journalists would say, hey, this has already been dealt with. But I've written a major story for The Advocate about it, and I see the Times Picayune has just now written a story about it, and I think it's going to come up.
But Vitter is counted with an ad, which I've seen run many times, with a woman talking about how Vitter helped her with some sort of a health problem.
Yeah, and the context of that ad is, so last week, an anti-Vitter group, people believe it's the trial lawyers, funded a 30-second ad statewide that attacks Vitter again on the prostitution issue. And then on Monday, his response was a very effective ad of a woman looking into the camera and saying that thanks to David Vitter, she's still alive, that he was able to secure a liver transplant for her. So if you're getting attacked on the prostitution issue, and women voters perhaps are wondering whether you're a trustworthy guy, what better response than have a woman come out and say, hey, basically he saved my life. And I talked to the woman, And she told me the full story, which was similar to what she said in the TV ad, which was very interesting. It was the same ad that ran in 2010 when he ran for re-election. He used the same ad again.
Well, I know senators are powerful, but how in fact was he able to save her?
His office was called the Social Security Administration and made a plea that she deserved a hearing and helped her get some papers that she said her lawyer was not doing that on her behalf.
Yeah, I think she said that she was having a problem with the insurance company, and then Senator Vitter helped clear the way for the the coverage.
And one thing David Vitter is known for is good constituency service.
So, okay, this is week one. We see these ads roll out. What can we anticipate over the next 5 weeks?
Right,
More attack ads, you think?
Well, John Bel Edwards, the perhaps the least known of the candidates at this point, the Democratic candidate, state representative, his ad is a what you call an introductory ad. He tells voters who he is, that he grew up in a meat, he was a high school quarterback, he went to West Point, he served in the Army. So once he gets done with that, he'll probably start talking about where he stands on the issues. And the other candidates perhaps will do the same thing. What we're seeing at this point, and which is consistent, which happens in other states, is that these outside PACs do the attacking, while the candidates with their own ads tend to stay positive.
Okay, well, we'll be seeing them over these next weeks. Thanks, Tyler. Jaquetta, the deal has been inked for the World Trade Center, even though there is a lawsuit in the background. So first, let's talk about the deal.
Sure.
With whom and what is it going to do?
Right, so the lease agreement between the city and the developers in Four Seasons to redevelop the former World Trade Center building was signed 4 months ago. What happened this week was that all the financial backers came to New Orleans, had a big press conference inside the lobby of the World Trade Center and said, okay, here's my money, I am putting up money. And that was to make a show, to say that this is real, to put aside some of this, hopefully, the skepticism about whether or not this project will happen. It's been something that's been tried to be developed in the past, and it's fallen through several times. And so the developers include, for instance, a holding company controlled by Bill Gates, Cascade Investment Group, and a representative from that company was there. There are also some local minority and smaller investors that are in on this project. They all signed their lives away this week during a press conference, and they say we're going forward with this. This is a $364 million redevelopment. It'll be 350 Four Seasons branded hotel rooms and about 76 condos.
Yeah, New Orleans has many prestigious hotel chain names, but one we haven't had was Four Seasons. That was conspicuously missing.
That's right, and the CEO of Four Seasons came in for this press conference, and I had a chance to chat with him, J. Allen Smith, and he said that the people who love to stay at Four Seasons hotels, he'd asked them where they wanted to see another Four Seasons, and overwhelmingly the response had been New Orleans.
So this is going to be a combination, as you said, of hotel rooms, but also condos, right?
That's right.
High-end condos that would be serviced by the hotel.
Exactly, hotel service condos on the upper levels.
What is the timeline for the project?
Well, they're in pre-construction right now, and they'll put out construction bids probably in October. You'll start to see some activity probably later this month and into next month, people taking tours, trying to get a feel for what they'll bid on this work for the project, and then construction will start early next year, first quarter of 2016.
Any sense of what they're going to do with Spanish Plaza, which has always struck me as a very underutilized area?
There are plans for it in the development. The complicating factors are all the ownership pieces of that. The Riverwalk is controlled by Howard Hughes, which has signed an agreement to be a partner on this project. How much they'll partner in turning over some of the property they owned is yet to be seen.
As you noted, back to the World Trade Center, it's had its start and stops. And so this one now is starting and it's going, so everyone says. But there is, as I mentioned, a lawsuit there in the wings. Does anybody fear that perhaps this could bring the project to a halt?
Everyone I've talked to is not giving much credence to this lawsuit. It was filed, there were 5 finalists in the running to redevelop the project. This one was filed by the company that placed last, two Canal Street investors. They had proposed a hotel, the Hotel Alessandra, at the site. And they're saying that the selection was improper, in part because they believe that the way the proposals were graded, the valuation of them, underscored that their project was underscored, that they should have gotten more points for the value they would have given to the city. I don't know if they'll be able to go forward with it. It's pending in court.
Doesn't that group include some pretty powerful businessmen, local businesmen?
No, these aren't local businessmen. They were on another project I believe that one came in second.
You talk about the starts and stops. The biggest stop, though, wasn't the city's fault. It was global. It was the devolution of World Trade Centers. It used to be port cities would have World Trade Centers, but once the Soviet Union fell, a lot of countries started developing consulates in those countries, and with the technology today, with the internet, you really perhaps don't need to be staffing an office at these towns as many places as you did. And so countries began cutting back on having consulates. So all of a sudden we had a great World Trade Center, but not that much occupancy. So since then, they were looking for something else.
Yeah, and I think it also speaks to just the need that we don't need as many office buildings in the city, and that a lot of those you're seeing around the city, especially in the downtown area, are now being converted into hotels.
Okay. All right, so we will start seeing work being done on the World Trade Center.
That's right. Construction began in early 2016, and they're planning to open it in early 2018. So
Okay.
2 years of construction.
In time for the tricentennial.
That's right.
All right, Jaquetta, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Jason, the Pope is visiting Cuba, and you had just a really great piece in the Atlantic, right? Regarding the church's role in communist Cuba all of these years. It has been there active and even more so now. You just returned from a trip.
I did. I spent 10 days on the island, and the piece is up today on theatlantic.com, How the Catholic Church Survived in Cuba. And Marcia, what struck me most in both the travels and the interviews I did in Miami, from here, and then in Cuba, was the degree to which Fidel tried to stamp out the church, pulled out all the stops, deported 2/3 of the priests and nuns, this is in the early 60s, terminated Catholic schools, and of course there was a huge diaspora of Cubans leaving, going to Miami and other parts of the United States. And it was finally in the mid-'80s that church leaders pulled together and decided, okay, we have to deal with this government as it is. And so they developed the idea of gaining space, which metaphorically means establishing the church in the public square, not calling for the demolition of the Communist Party or the revolution, but coexisting with it. And then by the late 90s, when the Soviet Union had fallen and Cuba went into an economic freefall, there was a huge influx of charitable donations, of aid. And Caritas, the Catholic relief organization, began to develop quite a presence. And now the church is sort of the de facto social safety net on the island. And so it has given Cardinal Ortega and others a kind of autonomy in the public square.
So for all of these years, the communist regime, since Fidel Castro, Catholics have been there, and have they been able to openly practice their faith?
Well, up until the mid-'80s, many people chose not to. There was a measured decline in church attendance. People are starting to go back now, but in terms of mass attendance, it is nowhere near the kind of church that you find in, Mexico or other parts of Latin America. On the other hand, it is a church that is gaining space, to use its own metaphor. And in some respects, the church has more freedom of expression than the conventional press, which is censored by the party. Of course, now with blogs and the internet, freedom of expression is one of the major issues that is sort of coursing through the island, and how well it emerges, whether there is greater freedom, I think is one of the issues that I'm sure the United States and Cuba will be negotiating.
And hasn't there been a rise of the non-Catholic church in Cuba as well, like evangelical churches and other faiths?
Yes, Tyler, as there are in other Latin American countries, indeed. But I think the Catholic Church is the dominant religious institution of the island, along with the Afro-Cuban religions. There's a deep Yoruba presence in Cuba, and with the syncretism of these African and Cuban traditions that have come together. I went to a procession for Our Lady of Regla, which is across the bay from Havana, and Our Lady is also known as Yemaya under the Yoruba cosmology belief system. And so one of the things that really struck me was a woman, an Afro-Cubano woman, who walked down the steps onto the edge of the bay, put a watermelon into the bay, and very solemnly made the sign of the cross. It was really quite a striking moment to see.
From your article, it seems like one thing that has endeared the Castro brothers to the Vatican is the efforts by at least the last 3 popes to try to open up relationships between the United States and Cuba, especially Pope Francis.
Yeah, Errol, with one small qualification. I think what has, if you will, endeared the Castro brothers or impressed them is that the Vatican from the very beginning did not sever diplomatic ties, and more so has opposed the embargo from jump. John the 23rd opposed it, Paul VI, John Paul II, Benedict, and now Francis. And of course it was under Pope Francis that they finally saw the breakthrough and diplomatic relations restored. He is emerging as probably, look, the Catholic Church is an ironic, edgy bedfellow with President Raul Castro. He is moving to open up the economy of the island. There are now more little examples of capitalist enterprises that have been seeded. The Jesuits are involved with two dioceses in teaching business classes. They still can't open a university, but they are teaching business classes. So, in a sense, the church has become both the opposition, if you will, and a kind of neutral partner with the state in trying to promote the return of a market economy.
And so Pope Francis arrives this Sunday, is it, in Cuba? But
yeah.
There have been
Sunday.
2 other papal visits in recent years, too.
Well, when John Paul went in 1998, it was widely considered a turning point. He happened to go on the day that the Monica Lewinsky scandal broke. And so many people in the American media flew back immediately. But the impact of that visit has been long-term, and everyone I interviewed mentioned it as a reference point. When Pope Benedict went several years ago, after his departure, the state made Good Friday a public holiday. So there have been these incremental changes. There were 3,500 prisoners released just last week as a sign, of openness, if you will, to the church. I think the big question that a lot of people have is whether Francis can have an impact in Washington that will lead ultimately to the embargo being dismantled.
Will we hear him make a call for that, do you feel?
I would suspect so, because both John Paul and Benedict did that before him. So yeah, I'd be surprised if he does not.
Okay, sounds fascinating, your trip there.
It was great.
He'll also be meeting with President Obama in Washington, too.
Right.
Yeah, and addressing Congress.
He's going to New York and Philadelphia as well in his
He
trip.
is, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, Jason, thanks a lot. Over to Errol now. And we heard yesterday more cuts at the Times Picayune, which basically was hinted at a couple of months ago, but we found out how many and who.
Yeah, in fact, I think they more than hinted. I think they said there will be
Yeah.
more cuts coming later in the year, and people weren't exactly sure how deep they would run and exactly when, even though the rumors started this week that they were going to come this week. It was roughly about 37 people, 28 full-time employees, 9 part-time employees, big heavy cuts in editorial. Some people who were like senior members who've been there for a long time, others who are more junior. But I think the ongoing debate is, advanced publications, which the new houses own, has been trying to adapt to the world of digital, and I think their vision has been way different from what all the other media companies have done, because no other media company has been quite as drastic as new houses have been, especially what they've done with other newspapers. And other newspapers in other markets, they close or they push back to 3 times a week, and there was hardly any comment at all. New Orleans was different. In New Orleans, there was a huge reaction. And when they were drawing out their strategy in 2010, 2011, obviously things they wouldn't have envisioned is that in New Orleans that there will be another daily newspaper to rise up and become competition, because whoever hears about new daily newspapers starting, and I think the emergence of the Advocate and the Advocate, which is growing stronger, has been a factor. Also, the more you read, according to some industry analysts, yes, there is a movement towards digital, but it's not as fast as people thought it was in terms of the advertising base. And so we think perhaps that what they might be facing in New Orleans, to Picayune, is the Advocate being stronger, its presence being more of a factor than anyone envisioned, and the fact that digital is not moving as fast as people thought it would. So all that said, it's the new world of newspapers. And incidentally, in the Advocate's coverage of what happened, Peter Kovacs, who is the editor, the Advocate, and who was a former Times Picayune alumnus, as are many of the talented people with the Advocate, including Jaquetta and Tom. Here's two people here who at one time worked for the Picayune. And so if nothing else, you can look back and say, there was a time in its glory days that the Picayune brought a lot of talented people into this market. A lot of them have left the market or are working for the Advocate, but Peter Kovacs has said that they're going to expand,
right.
and that they want to talk to some Advocate people too. And so some of the real talent we see is working there. But what we're going to see with the Times Picayune, I think they're going to stay with the 3 times a day format. We know there's going to be a design change because there's this design studio that they're opening, and later on this year, they're going to start actually printing the newspaper in Mobile. Now think about this. Imagine the old days when there was a late night ball game and they'd hold the presses back until they get that score. And now the papers are being trucked in from Mobile. And so you can imagine what time the press deadline is. And so late night news is going to be no longer a factor. How about election nights? Okay, election nights that run late. And so it's going to be it's going to have to be a different, more feature-oriented, more of a general news type of newspaper. And of course, and this is kind of dangerous. I think everybody in this business kind of fears this. In the world of internet with clicks, that people can measure clicks. And people can say, this story got this many clicks. This story didn't get too many clicks. Let's not be writing about this anymore.
Isn't that what they do at the Times Picayune now?
And that's a bad sign.
Well, I think the Times Picayune has said that they are going to publish what they see that the readers are interested in.
And what you're going to lose over time is like the coverage of the levee boards in some river parish that nobody really cared, but it's still important. It was always important to have that media presence there.
Yeah.
And so the whole nature of news media is in the process of changing. This was a pretty dramatic step this week.
It was, and it was sad to so many people, of course, those who lost their jobs, and so many of us who love reading what they write and really respect them as reporters. So we'll see if they perhaps will be moving elsewhere.
Well, there were some people who are just like lifetime journalists and who really deserve better.
Okay, thanks a lot, Errol. Okay, Tyler, over to you quickly. Now, you talked to some businesses and about what they hope will come out of this next governor's administration. What do they hope to see?
Yeah, I wrote a piece for Biz New Orleans. Folks can look at it online. It's what the business community wants from the next governor. A lot of different people want something from the next governor. The business community's got a lot of money and a lot of political power. And what they are, there's a couple of things. One thing is they're going to be on defense because the legislature in the 2015 session, to balance the budget, cut back various business tax breaks by about 25%. It only did it for 1 to 3 years, but business now is going to be fearful that that has kind of created a start, and that this could be happening again next year with the new governor and the new legislature. The business community is also going to take offense, particularly Laborde, the most powerful business group, on what they call tort reform. These are the laws that if you get hurt, you want to sue. If you get hurt, you want to be able to sue and get as much money as you can, but businesses don't like that. They say it happens too much. And on the environmental front, there's too many lawsuits that discourages business from wanting to invest. So in this governor's race, we're going to be seeing it. It isn't quite yet public, but there's going to be a big fight, I think, between the trial lawyers on one side and the business interest on the other. And then that whole issue will play out next year in the legislature as well.
Who is the business? Who are businesses, the industry in the state of Louisiana? Who do you think they're favoring in terms of a governor's candidate? Could you tell? Did you?
Well, if you look at the campaign contributions, you see that Senator Vitter has gotten millions and millions of dollars of contributions from various interests, oil interests, chemical interests, and so on. Public Service Commissioner Angel as well has got some big contributions, not as much, and Lieutenant Governor Jay Darden on the Democratic side, John Bell Edwards has gotten fewer contributions from business.
So we're going to be hearing from business interests during the rest of this campaign, basically.
Yes, and next year with whoever wins the election.
Yeah, and going to what's not going to be an easy legislative
section. Well, businesses always, you have a lot of time it's behind the scenes, so you may not necessarily be hearing, but they're there.
They are there.
They are indeed there. Okay, one quick question, but then I do want to touch on something.
Whatever happened to the $1.5 billion hole that was the big issue in the session? How did they rectify that?
They ended up solving that problem, and so the new budget that took effect July 1st ended that. But there are deficits to come And I'll be talking about that probably in a few minutes.
Oh, well.
Okay, thanks, Tyler. First, we're going to go over to Jaquetta, and sad to say that Jaquetta is going to be leaving New Orleans. You are a New Orleans girl, but you are going to be leaving because of family concerns, of family
That's
issues.
right.
So you have been a reporter here, seeing all these changes, all these major stories that have happened, and other changes in the business itself. Quickly, what are your feelings?
Sure, I'm actually optimistic about the city at this point. I see so many things to be proud of and positive about. There are obviously major concerns here, including crime and social and economic justice, but I think the mayor's administration has been doing a pretty good job under Judy Reese-Morse and Ashley Gardier in solving some of those issues. For me, leaving is definitely bittersweet. I work with a talented team at the New Orleans Advocate, and I am certain that I'll be back. I'm a New Orleans girl, graduated McDonough 35. My mom's still here, so there's definitely a reason to come home. But yes, moving to Portland, Oregon on Sunday.
Well, that's a lovely city, and best of luck to you.
Thank you.
And your family. Will you be getting into the media, do you think, over there?
We'll see.
We'll see. Well, Jaquetta, it's always been wonderful having you here,
you.
and it's always been wonderful reading your reports.
Thank you so
You've
much.
been a great asset to the media here in the New Orleans
Thank
area.
you.
Quick comment?
I was
Errol?
going to say, the beat that you covered a lot of development issues. So you were really in a position to really kind of see the heartbeat and feel the activity right there. So
That's right, and it's been tremendous. Every day there's something new going up, some new road closed because there's a hotel going up or some sort of construction project, and I think it really speaks to the environment we're in right now.
There's been growth, but there are still issues to face.
Definitely.
Okay, looking ahead.
okay, well, today was announced that the Huang chemical company out of China is investing $1.85 billion in St. James Parish. They're going to build a new plant to manufacture methanol. And what's significant about it is it's the first investment in Louisiana, first major investment with money from China.
Okay, great. Jason.
I'm going to be in Washington this coming week covering the Pope, and for those of you who are interested, I will be on Fox News with Shepard Smith Wednesday afternoon starting at 3 o'clock.
Okay, we've been looking for it, Jason. Thanks. Tyler.
I think the issue for people to look for is that the gubernatorial candidates be more specific on the budget. I got a big story coming out in the Advocate on Sunday, the lack of specificity on really the most pressing issue. And reporters are going to get a chance to question the candidates on Monday on this, hopefully on this subject at the Baton Rouge Press Club.
Okay, great. Jaquetta.
And I'm moving to Oregon, but I definitely encourage everyone to continue following my talented colleagues at the New Orleans Advocate. For politics, Jeff Adelson. For development, Richard Thompson.
Okay,
Thanks,
Jaquetta. And once again, best of luck.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys for being here. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.